Aw, nuts to this.
My world was destroyed by a cheaply made animated movie whose only goal was to sell me a buttload of new expensive robot toys. It failed in its attempt to hawk shittily made action figures to me, but 1986's The Transformers, the movie, has lived on longer and stronger in my memory than any other movie I watched in my childhood. Instead, it gained personal infamy by fucking with my 10-year-old brain by displaying horrific images of death and destruction doled out to childhood friends and idols the likes of which my sheltered little eyes had never seen before, got me into rock music, and taught me to outright hate a fictional character more than should be mentally healthy to do. It all started back in the early 80s when cartoons were finally permitted to start being cool. Prior to Reagan's America, animated TV shows aimed at kids were not allowed to exist for the sole purpose of selling toys. How un-American, I know. Or they had to be educational or some shit like that. But then things changed when, I'm guessing, the lawmakers of the time realized that reruns of Popeye the Sailor Man and Wacky Races just weren't cutting it anymore, and that American kids could handle a bit more bite in their weekday afternoon entertainment. And so, shows that mainly existed to peddle plastic action figures like Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Spiral Zone, and, most importantly, the Transformers were allowed to be born and be awesome. Well, Masters of the Universe was kinda lame and aimed at toddlers, but it was the first shot fired, and for that, it will always have my gratitude. Anyway, so the Transformers started out with a miniseries in 1984, which was thrown together pretty quickly, merging several separate Japanese transforming robot toy lines into one blob of metallic awesomeness. This led to a short 13-episode first season, which led to a 49-episode second season, which brought the full number of installments up to the lusted-after 65 episodes required for a weekday syndication ride. It was a commercial smash success. Toy robots that transformed, hence their brand name, into cars, jets, insects, dinosaurs, and fucking guns. Guns that were made of actual metal that looked pretty fucking real, mind you. God bless the 80s. Were rolling off store shelves, and the leader of the good robots, the magnificent truckster himself, Optimus Prime, and the ruler of the bad robots, the literal walking handgun, Megatron, who if kids ran around with him in his gun form, it looked just like they were out to rob a liquor store with an actual Walter P-38, quickly became iconic faces and voices in pop culture. The names and insignias of the freedom-loving Autobot good guys and the tyrannical Decepticon bad guys were known throughout classrooms and playgrounds across the country. Lord knows my parents must have been fully versed in the Autobot-Decepticon war that ravaged their home planet Cybertron for several millennium before finally leaking onto modern-day Earth, as I kept them up to date almost daily about the latest animated adventure that aired that afternoon. God damn, how the hell do they keep a straight face as I surely rambled on and on about those cartoons and toys, fully immersed in the tale as I was. Honestly, this makes me worried about having my own kids. If they start ranting and raving about My Little Pony or God Help Me Steven Universe or any other shitty cartoon on the telly at the time, I will just laugh in their faces and tell them that their shows suck. Then I'll make them watch Firefly or Breaking Bad to show them what real televised storytelling is all about. I take my entertainment very seriously, damn it. Anyway, so after 65 episodes were in the pipeline, Hasbro decided that it was time to up their game and create a theatrical version of their toy line that would not only sell new robot playthings to their target audience, but also actually get children and their parents to pay to see it. It was actually a genius, if not greedy as all fuck, move. So along came the summer of 1986, and for months and months my friends and I were inundated with commercials that aired during the Transformers TV show, which itself was a commercial for the Transformers toy line, asking very important questions about the upcoming Transformers feature event. Questions like,
does Prime die? Then who would lead the Autobots? And what is the secret of the monster planet?
The movie even had the greatest poster with the coolest tagline ever written on it. I had this very poster hanging on my bedroom wall from my 11th birthday till I graduated college. Don't judge me.
Beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination.
It was going to be the greatest thing I'd ever witnessed in a theater since Return of the fucking Jedi. I just knew it. Then came August 8th, 1986, and my good friend John and I convinced our parents to drop us off at the only cinema in town playing Transformers the movie. We couldn't figure out why only 1 out of 5 theaters in our area was showing it, and why it was only playing on 1 screen in that theater. This should have been something to rival E-fucking-T. Our parents refused to stay, but told us they'd be back to pick us up in an hour and a half. I think they went to a local watering hole and got all drunk and mocked their slightly mentally challenged offspring for falling for the marketing blitzkrieg that made us have to see that movie on opening weekend.
The movie itself.
For those of you either not familiar with Transformers the movie or not able to recall its what the fuckity plot, let me quickly get you up to speed on the basic premise. It is the year 2005, 20 years into the future from where the TV series left us at the time, and all the Transformers that were introduced in the second season of the TV show are nowhere to be found. We're talking dozens of robots here, all because production on the higher budgeted movie began before the second season was fully written and marketed. But the core cast of Autobots and Decepticons is here, and they're still fighting over the energy-drained Transformer homeworld of Cybertron. There was a whole new cast of movie-made, totally unfamiliar Autobots helping out Optimus Prime though. Robots that kids could run out and buy as soon as the credits rolled. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the Autobot-Decepticon war, we are first introduced to Unicron, a gigantic orange and gray metallic planet with a creepy orbital ring, 2 enormous pincers, and a gaping, glowing maw that devours other planets that appear to be in its way. Its way to what? We're never really told, but based on the story that follows, I'd say it's on its way to Cybertron, even though Cybertron housed the only thing that could feasibly destroy Unicron. Hell, if I were this giant devil planet, I'd just head in the opposite direction of the only thing in the known universe that could kill me and never look back. But I'm not a planet, I'm just a man. Unicron, the rogue monster planet, has perhaps one of the most memorable and utterly badass introductions of any villain of all time. He just appears shooting through space between a pair of crazy-looking binary stars. He targets a peaceful robotic world with lots of robo-kids running around and playing, and then he fucking eats that planet. The whole fucking planet. He captures it in his giant pincers and crunches it into oblivion. Then he lights up his rings in a form of a giant robotic burp or an unbuckling of his pants and a sigh of a well-ingested meal. That totally beats Darth Vader just walking through a door after all his troops have already killed everybody, or the Terminator stealing some punk-ass bitch's clothes. Anyway, we then meet up with Autobot leader Optimus Prime. He, spur of the moment, decides that his posse needs to stage an all-out attack on the Decepticon-held Cybertron, but they need a lot of Energon, the Transformers' power source, to do it. He sends some of his soldiers to Earth to get some, but the Decepticon leader Megatron and his cronies intercept the good guy shuttle, use it to breach the Autobot city on Earth's outer defenses, then an all-out super violent battle occurs, and almost all of the old familiar, well-loved robots die horrible and brutal deaths. Optimus Prime himself then shows up with Dinobot backup, and he battles Megatron mano a mano, robot a robot. They both get fucked up, but Prime is grievously injured because of the annoying and interfering new Transformer, Hot Rod. Fuck you, Hot Rod. The Decepticons retreat, Megatron is abandoned by his troops on the way back to Cybertron and meets up with the planet killer Unicron, who gives him and his discarded troops new powerful bodies and new names and orders them to destroy the Autobot matrix of leadership, which apparently everybody and the robotic mother knows resides in Optimus's chest cavity, despite the audience not hearing about it once in the first 2 seasons of the TV show. Despite being a robot, with parts that can be switched out and replaced when needed, Optimus dies, but not before passing the matrix to Robert Stack, the new toy leader of the Autobots. Unicron eats 2 of the Autobot-held Cybertronian moons. Human Spike, from the original show, who was looking much rougher than his 35-year-old self should look at this point in time. I guess Robot War is indeed hell. Well, he says a bad word.
Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?
And then we watch in horror as Megatron, or Galvatron, hunts down the very few remaining Autobots who we've never seen before the start of this movie, including Hothead Hot Rod, Crotchety Old Cup, Tough Guy Springer, Pink Lady Bot RC, Rapid Talking Blur, and Robert Stack. The good bots escape but get separated in space, with half crashing on the planet of junk and half wrecking on the planet of courtrooms. Galvatron gets the Matrix after finding and killing Robert Stack, then the Autobots all meet up again, magically resurrect Mr. Stack, even though they apparently couldn't do the same for Optimus for some reason, head back to Cybertron where they witness one of the coolest sights ever produced in a sci-fi movie. Unicron transformed into a giant devil robot standing on Cybertron and fighting the rest of the Transformers who weren't savagely murdered earlier in the movie. The Autobots enter Unicron. Get your mind out of the gutter. Hot Rod takes the Matrix from Galvatron, who was swallowed by the devil bot after trying to use the Matrix on him, and then Hot Rod magically becomes
Rodimus Prime, the new toy leader of the Autobots.
Rodimus Prime. Jesus, they might as well have called him
Because Dickens?
then uses the Matrix to somehow blow the devil robot up from the inside, and then the handful of remaining Autobots celebrate as if their home planet was not just used as a doormat by a humongous robotic Satan monster just minutes before. Cue the rockin' remake of the Transformers theme song, and scene.
What did 10-year-old me think of Transformers the movie?
John and I came out of the theater with our collective immature minds blown. The hyperaction, the unnecessary violence, the profanity, and the music. It was all almost too much for us. I loved the fucking shit out of the movie and used my allowance to buy the soundtrack the following day. I then proceeded to listen to it over and over again for years afterwards. Hell, it's on heavy rotation on my iTunes even today, and I can still recite all the lyrics to all the songs, and I know Vince DiCola's synthesized background music by heart. It is a brilliant album. 10-year-old me was slightly scarred by all the death, destruction, and dismay in this flick, but strangely, the violent murders of all the classic Autobots wounded me much more than Papa Prime's valiant demise. At least Optimus fought bravely until the end and got time to say his goodbyes. The rest of the bots died off-screen or like puppies in the middle of a highway. The plot felt like one of the typical 5-part episode TV storylines that G.I. Joe, the Transformers, and Thundercats had once or twice a season. Every 15 to 20 minutes or so, the location or feel of the narrative would change, making me think, even as a child, that this was being primed to be cut up and then played within the TV series syndicated schedule come the following season. The action was cranked up to 11 from the typical Transformers episode, as was the animation quality, which I would later learn had 6 times the budget of the equivalent of 5 regular TV episodes. Even though the smoothness of the animation along with the extra details added to the characters and the vehicles wasn't half as great as, say, a Disney or Don Bluth movie, as a kid I still thought it was amazing. So much better than what I was used to with the Transformers TV show. At the time, I didn't like any of the new characters though. I wanted to see my favorite robots on the big screen, not new characters that I'd never even seen before. Even as a kid, I realized that they were just throwing new robots at us in order to show us the upcoming fall toy line. I used to love it when new, cool characters were added to the TV series. It meant that soon I'd be able to bug my parents for the action figures for my birthday or Christmas. But the absolutely unnecessary slaughter of everyone that we knew before, with the exception of Bumblebee, Jazz, Perceptor, really not Prime but Perceptor, and the Dinobots, was just so ill thought out. It'd be like if all the Disney movies were interconnected and they were tired of trying to sell old Snow White and Cinderella shit to their main child demographic. And so, in the new movie that they just released, Frozen's Elsa accidentally deep freezes the early Disney princesses, and then Ursula shatters their iced corpses into millions of bloody pieces in front of a theater full of unbelieving 5 to 10-year-old girls. Sure, the old princesses, for the most part, were outdated and kinda dumb, but why oh why would you think that straight up violently murdering them was the best route to take? But like I just said, Transformers the movie failed in its most basic purpose. It didn't make me, or anybody else that I ever talked to, want to buy any of the new toys introduced in its 90-minute runtime. The new action figures on Toy Store shelves fucking sucked. Galvatron's figure looked nothing like the badass slick design in the flick. Instead, the toy looked stumpy and slightly Ultra Robert Stack was pretty much just a giant block of plastic in his robot design. Springer's transformations in toy form looked ridiculous and nothing like his transformations in the movie. The Sharkticons were lame in both their shark and the robot modes, and everybody else was just a weird futuristic version of modern vehicles, like a 1960s take on what a 2005 truck or sports car would look like, which was counter to the entire point of the Transformers toy line in the first place. They were originally created in order to have everyday cars and jets and tanks that kids could recognize and that could exist secretly in our own world in their vehicle forms change into bitch bitchin' robots. The movie killed all the classic action figures and instead gave us Cup and Wheelie. Cup's Cybertronian truck and Wheelie's Tennessee orange gimpy wheeled thing would never blend in with Earth vehicles, which, once again, and this is very important, was the toy line's entire fucking premise. And alas, the coolest, most amazing robot in the entire movie, that would be the planet-devouring satanic robot Unicron, didn't even get a toy made of him until 20 years later. That is absolute bullshit. Why make a movie to sell new toys if you don't even make a toy of the one character kids wanted most? Instead, you give us the garbagey Galvatron and the, I don't even know what the fuck they are, sweeps. What were the sweeps? They look like flying flatboats. Fuck you, Hasbro. Other than the orange cannon on its right arm, if you saw the awful toy here in person, would you have guessed that it was supposed to be Galvatron? I hope to high hell that the toy modeler for this should have been aborted figure got shot in the face and then fired for this monstrosity. If your only job is to make toys that don't look lame and suck, and then you produce this, your life is utterly pointless. Oh, and let's look at the Autobot toys from the movie next. Rodimus Prime at least looks slightly like his animated counterpart, minus any actual articulation, but Springer and Ultra Robert Stack are just jokes at the consumer's expense. I'll tell you what, the only 3 new toys that I was even remotely interested in after coming out of the movie theater were Unicron, Galvatron, and Springer, but there wasn't a Unicron available, and after seeing Galvy's and Springer's real-world plastic forms, I just said fuck it and went back to listening to the headbanging soundtrack again. Anyway, as it turned out, the Transformers the movie only lasted a couple of weeks in theaters. Shocking, I know. And John and I were pretty much the only kids in our school who went to see it before school began that September. We were minor celebrities because of this. We would spend our lunch periods telling the tale of how Ironhide got shot point blank by Megatron's arm cannon and got his head turned into nanoparticles right in front of our eyes, how badass Prime and Megatron's final fight was, and how Unicron was a goddamn huge transforming devil planet that almost ate Cybertron. I don't think the rest of the kids believed us at the time, not until the 3rd season began airing later that month and had a brief rundown of the movie before the first episode, which did vindicate us, but it was a little too late at the time.
What do I think of the movie now?
I've seen Transformers the movie more times than any other flick in my life. This is absolutely true, and this is mostly due to me working at Blockbuster Video for 5 years of my wasted youth, through high school and college, and being allowed to put any G or PG rated flick that we wanted on the store monitors while we worked. For the first 3 years I worked there at least, before corporate made us start playing their crappy Entertainment Tonight tapes that tried to pimp the newest, shittiest movies to our customers on mind-numbing 2-hour loops. But I digress. Whenever it was my turn to pick what we watched, in went Transformers the movie. By the end of my Blockbuster career, my store's VHS tape of that flick looked like shit. Half the picture was fuzzy, the sound was messed up in multiple sections, and the screen would roll for half its runtime, but I just kept putting it in. I believe I can still quote the entire flick line for line even today. Transformers the movie is also something that I pull out every so often and watch as a comfort movie of sorts. It always pulls me back to my rose-tinted youth and makes me smile. Recently I've taken to showing it to friends and family who have either never seen it or who barely remember it, but I'll get to that later. I think that for a giant expensive toy commercial, it could have been a lot worse, like G.I. Joe the movie worse. I'm not too fond of a lot of the new characters in Transformers the movie, but I absolutely love the scope of the thing. Yes, the plot is crazy, and it tries replicating Star Wars awesomeness a bit too much. I mean, from RC having Princess Leia's hairdo, down to the big enemy weapon being a giant planet-killing moon. But it's a galaxy-spanning trip that pits a totally overwhelmed team of good guy robots against Robot Satan. What is not to like about that? The bits of levity sprinkled throughout the runtime help alleviate the pain from watching all our favorite childhood friends get murdered right in front of our eyes, and the humor is not too distracting overall. Honestly, one of my favorite scenes from the movie is when the Dinobots bust into the Quintesson's kangaroo court to save Cup and Hot Rod, and after the giant door smashes a still wriggling Quintesson clerk, Slag stops to say,
Excuse me!
That's another thing that I love about this thing, the lines. There are a ton of lines in it that I still quote today when appropriate, and even when not appropriate, like these.
Unlike some of my other warriors, you never fail me. Such heroic nonsense.
Table rubbing, young punk. I'll straighten you out yet.
I was afraid you'd be trapped outside the city.
I wasn't worried for a microsecond.
Then you probably didn't understand the situation.
got better things to do tonight than die.
One shall stand, one shall fall. Why throw away your life so recklessly? I would have waited an eternity for this.
Oh, how it pains me to do this.
Wait, I still function.
Wanna bet?
Soundwave superior, Constructicons inferior.
Hey, nobody calls Soundwave uncharismatic.
I have summoned you here for a purpose. Nobody summons Megatron. Then it pleases me to be the first.
Ba weep grana weep nini bun.
Spare me this mockery of justice!
I have nothing but contempt for this court.
Which, in hindsight, wasn't the best thing to quote during my speeding ticket trial when I was 22.
For a time, I considered sparing your wretched little planet Cybertron. But now, you shall witness its dismemberment. It's a pity you Autobots die so easily, or I might have a sense of satisfaction now.
And
Destiny, you cannot destroy my destiny!
I still find Transformers the movie to be fun, if not overly violent, escapism. It's not as grand as it could have been, but it's definitely not the worst thing to ever be animated. That would be Titanic: The Legend Lives On.
You know there's something you should know, so I'm gonna tell you so. Don't sweat it, forget it, enjoy the show. Working all day, now it's time to unwind. Kick back, relax, take a load off your mind. I'll be busting the moves and I'll be busting the rhymes. We'll be busting up laughing cause it's party time.
Yep, that just happened.
The plot problems.
The story of Transformers the movie isn't really that terrible, but it is horrendously edited, and there are a lot of plot holes that the writers just weren't willing to put the time into patching up before their final deadline. Time skips and trying to keep track of who was where and at what point in the story plagued this film like Montezuma plagued all future invaders and tourists. Even as a 10-year-old child, I recognized how weird it was that it seemed to take at least a full day for Autobots and Decepticons to travel through space from Cybertron to Earth in the beginning of the movie, but by the middle of it all of a sudden only takes the Decepticons 30 seconds to make the same trip. This is of course because the portion of the movie where Unicron attacks the second moon of Cybertron was moved to earlier in the story, contrary to the script and its original timeline, which makes reactions to the news of the planetary onslaught by the Autobots and Galvatron's departure from Cybertron and arrival on Earth seem out of sync with the rest of the story. The timeline in the script at least makes a little more sense in these scenes, with Galvatron heading to Earth after Unicron eats the first moon, but before he eats the second. There are several instances of strange editing like this throughout the movie, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why they happened, especially after they were actually animated in the script order and then became continuity errors after the final edits, like the moon that Unicron devoured still being in the sky above Cybertron after he munched on it in the finished film. Other than the instances of bad editing and continuity errors, there are tons of things that happen in this movie that make no sense at all. Like, why does that shitty asshole Wheelie, who only speaks in rhymes, already have an Autobot insignia on him before he runs into Grimlock, Hot Rod, and Cup? Why is every planet in the universe, except for Earth, populated by sentient transforming robots? What the hell is the Quintesson Monkey Court all about? Why can an exploded Ultra Robert Stack be fixed up while a fully intact Optimus is just left rusting on a mechanics rack? Why is the Autobot Matrix the only thing that can defeat Unicron? And how the fuck does the Monster Planet even know about this strange weakness when we, the audience, didn't know that the Matrix even existed prior to the start of the movie? These things still make me scratch my head in confusion and keep me awake at night. But one thing that I never understood is how do all these planets with highly advanced robots with spacefaring technologies living on them not sense or even see an even bigger planet with a glowing maw coming right at them until it's slurping up their continents like Pescetti? Jesus, fuck, did I say spaghetti? Coming right at them until it's slurping up their continents like spaghetti. There we go. Yeah, this is a movie aimed at kids, but that doesn't mean that it should forsake all logic and just show us random images of things going boom. That's just sloppy writing. Children's movies should be as logically sound as movies aimed at adults, just without as much adulty things in them. Granted, sometimes errors happen within the plot or through editing, but I honestly could have written an entire 30-minute video about the silly things that occur in this flick that don't make any sense to my adult mind. But that's not the point of this reminiscence, so I shall move on. Also, as I stated earlier, the violence, as nightmare-inducing as it was to kids in the mid-80s, was actually toned down for the final film. In the earlier scripts, Autobots died even more viciously than they did in the movie's final form. Ratchet and Ironhide were shot so much and heated up by Decepticon lasers that they fused together before exploding, and Robert Stackness was literally drawn and fucking quartered by the sweeps instead of simply falling apart in a weird explosion. Seriously, they had the second Autobot leader in this movie drawn and quartered to death. That is fucking horrible. Anyway, the story of the seemingly never-ending robot battle, finally stepping up and concluding things in a grand way, could have been a very well-scripted narrative if the writers were allowed to write what they wanted with the characters they and the audience knew from years of TV adventures. But just like the G.I. Joe movie staff, their ideas were discounted because there weren't enough new toys to sell in the tale the writers wanted to push. And G.I. Joe the movie was originally planned to be a story of political belief systems and not a tale about snake people living in the Himalayas who want to turn all the humans on the planet into monkeys. I had read interviews where the Transformers the movie writers originally intended most of the action to take place on Cybertron, and for Optimus Prime to survive until the end of the movie, where he would open the Matrix and sacrifice himself to destroy an attacking Unicron. It was a much bigger final bow for Optimus, and the story of the Autobots and Decepticons actually working together against a larger threat sounded much more interesting than the same old cat and mouse chase that we did end up getting.
A loss. Earwax.
Here's a list of things that I find hilarious about this movie now that I'm an adult. Hot rod fishing. The fact that Spike, after witnessing firsthand the terror of a giant robot war for 20 years, allows his 10-year-old kid Daniel to hang out with the Autobots while they're caught up in the middle of an intergalactic war being waged by giant robots who could accidentally step on the kid and not even notice it until a few days later. When Optimus was about to croak and he opened up his torso and removed the Matrix of Leadership in order to pass it on to Robert Stack, and Robert Stack just so happened to have a hollow space the perfect size to receive this device too. What even is this Matrix of Leadership, you ask? Well, it's an orange sphere with a strange ring around it and a glowing open maw in the front that, holy shit, it's a mini Unicron. It took me over 30 years, but I just got that. Fuck me. Somehow, Unicron sees the Matrix surviving Optimus's death, and he throws an unexplained at the time hissy fit in space. Seriously, how the fuddly-yuck did Unicron see Optimus's death? Did he hack the Autobot City security cameras? Are there Autobot City security cameras in the medbay? There's this one scene where the Decepticons attack the Autobots on Junkion, the trash dump of the galaxy, and all the heroic Autobots book it to save their own asses, and they leave 10-year-old human Daniel behind to fend for himself against the giant metal death machine Decepticons with no shits given. Honestly, I laughed harder at this scene than anything else. The Quintesson mock court just makes no sense narratively speaking. These floating heads with 5 faces capture creatures that land on their planet, ask them if they're guilty or innocent, and then dunk them in the robot's shark tank no matter the verdict. What the hell is the point of this scene? The fact that they never bothered making a Quintesson toy, or an AlligatorCon, RC, or Unicron figures, which, as I said before, and will probably say again, was the entire point of this production, selling shitty toys, just blows my mind. At the end of the movie, when Daniel is inside Unicron, and he almost watches his father die one of the worst possible deaths imaginable, in a vat of acid, and it would have been entirely his fault. How Hot Rod found Galvatron so quickly in the innards of a creature the size of a planet. I have a hard time meeting up with friends in a small town, and we all have smartphones on us. Unicron's stomach is the size of Wyoming. Now let's talk about
The animation.
Well, the animation quality of the Transformers, the movie, is better than that of the television series, obviously, but that ain't saying much. Yes, there's more frames per second, and yes, there are more shadows and shiny things in the movie, but overall, compared to other animated movies of the time, it's just not very good. Sure, there are some amazing scenes in which you can see where the much larger budget actually produced some awe-inspiring results, mostly things like Unicron's introduction and the consumption of that first planet that he chows down on, and the Optimus Megatron fight, but the film's budget was still only something around $6 million, when things like Disney's The Black Cauldron and The Little Mermaid, back when the House of Mouse didn't really splurge on its feature animation projects anymore, had between $40 to $44 million available per production. And Transformers the movie's shoestring budget shows pretty much the whole way through. There are tons of instances of characters being drawn off model in this thing. Grimlock, in the second half of this flick, turns almost chibi, with his dinosaur eyes taking up half his head, and his arms shrinking and growing with every other painted cell, with one shot making him look like he has Popeye's forearms. And don't forget that one entire scene when Unicron was drawn as an entirely different robot. It looks like he shaved and bought a new helmet for the shot, or they accidentally used the take with his stunt double in it. There are even examples galore of plain old animation mistakes peppered throughout this flick. For example, when Hot Rod rolls off the horizontal spike that he was hanging from after a ship crashed through Unicron's eye, part of his leg disappears, and it's clear that the part that is missing was supposed to be behind the spike, but somebody in the studio must have bumped the desk while the cells were being photographed, and then the quality assurance guy was like,
Man, close enough.
I mean, characters are drawn off model in animated movies all the time. The difference here is that instead of one quick frame of a larger hand or a non-colored in mouth, the drawing errors in Transformers the movie are on screen long enough for a child to notice them. Children usually gloss over this shit and just chalk it up to, it's just the way it is. But here, I noticed dozens of these kinds of errors during my initial viewing over 30 years ago. Not that it hurts the movie all that much, but it does take you out of the storytelling a bit when you notice the glitches in the Matrix like this. Pun intended. Nitpicking the mistakes in a dinky movie's budget is like shooting monkeys in a barrel, though. It's not so bad that these mistakes really harm the film any more than the plot and editing issues, and the director and animators were forced to rush this movie to theaters in a record short amount of time, so I can cut them a lot of slack in that regard.
The characters.
I loved all the Autobots and Decepticons from the TV show and the first 10 minutes of this movie. Optimus Prime, Megatron, Starscream, Ironhide, Soundwave, Ratchet, etc. They were either valiant paladins worthy of my imagined friendship, or they were the perfect power-hungry or conniving scoundrels needed to counter the courageous robotic heroes in their quest for equality and honor. They, of course, were all slaughtered or turned into new toys in the movie. The only new character created for this movie that I out and out loved was Unicron. He had an amazing presence, a creepy and dastardly appearance, and his threat level was through the galactic roof. You can't ask for a more fulfilling villain. All you can ask for, though, is where does Unicron come from? What are his goals? What is his Why does just opening the robotic heart of the Autobots automatically make him explode? Granted, those are questions that when asked really make you wonder if anybody was not high during the entire production of this movie. I mean, how do you not answer any of those queries about your main villain and his motivations when the entire plot revolves around him? So yeah, maybe a little is left to be desired in regards to Unicron 2. He just exists and is evil. Adult me has a major problem with that from a storytelling point of view, but his coolness factor still makes me geek out like 9-year-old me watching him transform for the first time. But in the end, he curb stomps Cybertron during the final battle, and that's all I really need. As for the new shoehorned in characters who are meant to replace all the old ones that I called friends, I only really liked Autobots Springer and Cup, and Decepticon Galvatron, who was really just a crazier version of Megatron. Hot Rod was an annoying fucking turd who was 100% fucking responsible for killing Optimus Prime. God damn it, 35 years later and I'm still super pissed about that. Most people when watching this movie, and especially while witnessing Prime's death, think,
oh boy, that villain Megatron finally killed Optimus Prime. What a dickhole.
but they're wrong. Despite Megatron's cheating and lying in his knockdown, drag-out fight with his arch-nemesis, Prime was poised to win. Good was about to triumph, but then Hot Rod, that rebellious teenage robot, jumped on Megatron, who was reaching for a gun while pretending to beg for mercy. Megatron then used the tiny twat of an Autobot as a robotic shield so that Prime could not shoot him. Then the Decepticon unloaded like 3 or 4 mega laser shots into Optimus's torso, ultimately finishing him off. The rest of the Autobots then just seemed to shrug off the fact that they'd still have Optimus with them if it wasn't for the worst tactical mistake ever blundered into in Transformers history. Even topping the time the Decepticons all got drunk on Energon cubes at the same time, though that was at least a hell of a party. After that, one could argue that Hot Rod spent the rest of the movie trying to redeem himself, but he was really just the same douchey punk that he ever was, with apparently no extra baggage after being responsible for the killing of one of my generation's greatest fictional heroes. Fuck Hot Rod. It is still annoying to me that we weren't allowed to watch Optimus Prime awesomely shine for the full runtime of this movie. But after years of therapy, I have finally come to terms with this. Yeah, Galvatron killed one of the only long-term Decepticons who was removed from toy store shelves in this feature when he turned Starscream to literal dust as soon as he arrived on Cybertron. But Starscream had it coming for a long time. Starscream was one of the only deaths in this massacre of a movie in which I just sat there thinking, yeah, that's actually pretty justified. After all the times he tried to kill Megatron, or usurp power within the Decepticon party, or utterly failed in whatever simple mission he was assigned, no matter how easy it may have been. Sorry, Starscream, but you were a backstabbing whore. The rest of the deaths in this thing mostly bothered me because of how easy they seemed. All these super tough Autobots who were more than a match for their bloodthirsty counterparts in the Decepticon army used to either just shrug a laser blast off or at the very most only needed minor repairs after a skirmish with the enemy. Here, one single shot took down two of the toughest Autobots we'd known up until this time. One of the bots was only hit in the shoulder too. A shoulder shot wouldn't have even killed a wussy human, but a robot named Brawn dropped like a sack of robotic potatoes from the same wimpy wound. That's just bullshit, writers. You should have at least let those brave heroes go out with a little more dignity.
The voice actors.
I didn't know that there were so many B-list stars who were so willing to throw their hats into the ring of voice acting in 90-minute toy commercials in the 80s. I have no idea when the whole idea of getting celebrities instead of trained voice actors to do the lead roles in animated movies began, but it is absolutely ridiculous to me that Leonard Nimoy, Judd Nelson, Robert Stack, Eric Idle, Lionel Stander, and of course, the one and only Orson fucking Welles signed up to act in an hour-and-a-half ad for Japanese robotic playthings. We're not even talking a timeless Disney cartoon here, only a feature-length commercial for selling shitty plastic toys. Yeah, I know they were die-cast metal in the 80s, just get off my back. It's funnier if I say shitty plastic toys. I'm not complaining, mind you. I honestly find it amazing and great that Galvatron is voiced by Star Trek's Spock. I guess I just didn't realize that these actors were slumming it, as it were, at this point in their careers, where doing Transformers the movie was a step up for them. Okay, Eric Idle really only had Monty Python work before this, and the Python crew hadn't done anything since 1983's The Meaning of Life. Lionel Stander was just a third-rate actor, mostly known for being the butler on the TV show Heart to Heart. Leonard Nimoy pretty much just had Spock, In Search Of, and that Bilbo Baggins song going for him.
Bilbo Baggins, the bravest little hobbit of them all.
And Judd Nelson was only at the beginning and ultimately the end of his career at the time. But Orson fucking Welles, oh, how the mighty had fallen! Orson Welles was known as one of the greatest directors of all time, with Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil under his rather extendable belt. He was a well-known Shakespearean actor, the voice of Robin Masters on Magnum P.I., bet you didn't know that, and his War of the Worlds radio broadcast was the stuff of legends. But near the end of his life, he was doing voiceover work for pea commercials and voicing a giant, nasty, gluttonous planet. Some people, like me, thought that playing something larger than his actual girthy physical self would be kind of a lifelong goal for Orson, but in one of the last interviews he gave before his death, he is quoted as saying,
You know what I did this morning? I played the voice of a toy. Some terrible robot toys from Japan that changed from one thing to another. The Japanese have funded a full-length animated cartoon about the doings of these toys, which is all bad outer space stuff. I played a planet. I menace somebody called something or other, then I'm destroyed. My plan to destroy whoever it is thwarted, and I tear myself apart on the screen.
That does not sound to me like a man who is happy with his life choices at that point in his career. And sadly, for Orson, his role of Unicron was the last of his life. He died just a short while after finishing up his voice work as the Rotund Demon Planet. Apparently they could destroy his... Back to Eric Idle. How in the hell did he get top billing in this movie? Granted, he was up against Spock and that man who used to be Robert Stack, but Judd Nelson was hot off The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire just before Transformers the movie opened, and Judd even plays the main protagonist in this flick. And I think Eric Idle was only in this thing for like 5 to 10 minutes max. Do Brits just automatically get top billing in things? Hollywood is weird. Anyway, for not being actual voice actors trained in the craft, the celebrity stars do a surprisingly good job with their roles. Spock goes all in with his demented and tortured version of Galvatron, giving Frank Welker, the voice and soul of Megatron, a run for his money.
Coronation, Starscream? This is bad comedy.
Judd does a passable job as Hot Rod, seemingly truly enjoying his time playing a flaming red and yellow dipshit robot who kills Optimus Prime.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember.
Ba weep grana, weep ninny bong.
Lionel Stander as Cup sounds perfect as an ancient war vet who's seen every fucking thing imaginable during his long life spent as a soldier.
This reminds me of the battle on Alpha 9, like the Shrike Bats of Dromedon. Yep, I remember the dust was so thick off Beta 4, and then this gigantic Ikyak came trumping and stumping down the mountain.
Doesn't this remind you of anything, Cup?
Nope. Never seen anything like this before.
But then there's Eric Idle's wreck car. Fuck me if I knew what the hell he was saying even a quarter of the time. They overly synthed his voice to the point where it sounds like a broken CNC had its lines spoken through a broken auto-tuner. Whose choice was it to do that to the ex-Python member?
And I go for the gospel.
Then we had Robert Stack just being Robert Stack.
I can't deal with that now.
And that annoying Micro Machines guy making his character Blur talk like he had 5 espressos and a couple of live weasels in his pants while he recorded his lines.
What about me, Magnus? What about me? I can help, I want to help. What about me?
I hated Blur almost as much as I hated Wheelie. The other Transformers, whose voice actors were just pulled over from the TV series, did their jobs admirably, especially Frank Welker, Chris Latta as Starscream, and the legendary Peter Cullen, aka Mr. Optimus Prime and Ironhide.
This was almost too easy, Starscream.
Megatron? Is that you?
Megatron must be stopped, no matter the cost.
But before I wrap this segment up, I'd like to talk about Orson Welles' performance. It's well known that in the last days of his life, he was so worn out and large that he had to be rolled into the sound recording booth in a wheelchair. But even though he never bothered to read the script of Transformers the movie before coming into his first recording session, Welles did his duty and even argued with the directors over what should be said and how he should perform the role, showing that even though the part may not have been his ideal choice, he still cared enough to make it the best that it could be. It was stated in interviews with Nelson Shin, the movie's main director, that Orson's work in the studio was barely usable due to his rapidly declining health, and that the audio techs had to greatly modify Unicron's voice in order to make it functional. That's kind of a sad ending to the life's work of the uber baritone who made Rosebud a household quote, but I am very grateful that he was able to complete his lines and gave life to one of cinema's largest villains, Unicron, greatest bad guy ever.
The music.
I don't know if it's only because I'm looking back on the soundtrack with rose-tinted glasses, or because the movie's album is absolutely amazeballs, but the Transformers the movie soundtrack is fucking amazeballs. The flick is almost wall-to-wall, head-banging rock anthems, glam metal, and synthesized action sequences, with the synth portions written by sort of famed 80s composer Vince DiCola. Think Rocky IV. And it changed my life almost as much as the violence in the movie proper did, only the music opened my ears and mind to something more than just the regular old pop tunes I would hear on the radio at the time, which was a good thing, and it didn't mentally scar me like the murdering of my animated friends on the big screen, which still makes me tear up sometimes. Optimus. The movie starts with a haunting overture wherein we watch Monster Planet Unicron sail through the stars and then devour a peaceful robot world and a terrifying display of gluttony and fear. Then after Unicron is satiated and his orbital rings light up like a Roman candle igniting a lit up Christmas tree, The heavy metal version of the Transformers theme song kicks it into gear, sung by Lion. I have no idea who the fuck Lion is or if they ever performed anything else half as great as this in their lifetime. But that goes for pretty much every artist on this ear-blastingly groovy album, except for Weird Al Yankovic, of course, but he's a legend, and I digress. The Transformers theme song here is out of this goddamn world. Yeah, the G.I. Joe movie tried to do something similar with its extended theme song during its opening pre-credit sequence, but that was just sung by the same schleps who sang the original TV version. It didn't feel different, and it wasn't really all that cool. By getting an actual heavy metal band to sing the song in the Transformers movie, Marvel Entertainment raised the bar. They made a children's toy theme song powerful and wicked awesome. If you don't believe me, give it a listen. 35 years later, and that's still the most badass children's toy anthem ever. After that, NRG's Instruments of Destruction starts playing as Megatron and his cronies obliterate the Autobots on the shuttle heading for Earth in the first act. The lyrics, like Instruments of Destruction, tools of our blaze, it's a fire and corruption, existence strips away, make the scene even darker and more bleak than it already is, and the heavy metal drum beat and some trilling guitar work adds to the grimness of the Autobots' terrifying final moments. You may ask, who is NRG and why should we care? And I'll give you the answers of I have no fucking clue and because Instruments of Destruction is the best slaughter background song of all goddamn time. It's cruel, it's kind of depressing, and it makes you want to sing along, especially when the lead vocalist just starts belting out and then that final drum solo at the end that signals the scene's deadly finality. It's so choice. Next up, chronologically in the movie, is one of the songs that changed my life for the better. Stan Bush's Dare. Dare is pure 80s pop rock, and it's so unapologetic for its own upbeatness. The scene that it starts playing in is kinda lame. Autobot Hot Rod and 10-year-old human Daniel are fishing on Earth, and then they race to
Lookout Mountain to see the Autobot shuttle land in Autobot City in the valley below.
Daniel is way too excited about the mundane shuttle approach, as the super encouraging Dare lets us know. But soon the song takes on a different meaning when Hot Rod notices there's Decepticons visible in a hole in the shuttle, and he starts shooting the shit out of it, both alerting the Autobots on Earth to the sneak attack and causing the giant spacecraft filled with Decepticons to focus their entire attention on him and his human charge. The rest of the song plays while Hot Rod and Daniel try to make it to the safety of Autobot City while a fuck ton of Decepticons shoot at their heads. Then there's the Autobot Decepticon battle by Vince DiCola, which is a frantic, nerve-jangling, synthesized track that makes you think that all the Autobots being attacked by the hordes of Decepticons are about to die. And then they do. But fear not, for following that bit is the Savior of the World song that every kid my age now knows by heart, Stan Bush's The Touch. This is the song of Transformers the movie. This is the song of my youth. The Touch was originally written for the Sly Stallone flick Cobra, but thank Christ it wasn't included there, for then I, and my generation of trans fans, wow, that sounds kind of kinky, would never have heard it play as Optimus Prime and Megatron beat and shot the living robotic shit out of each other in the greatest grudge match of all time. The Touch is super positive, life-affirming, and it drives you to want to do better than you think you can do in whatever situation you find yourself in. It gives you hope that the leader of the Autobots will stop the slaughter of his people single-handedly, and that is actually what happens while you hear the track in the movie.
Then fucking Hot Rod had to come along and cunt everything up with his creation. Fuck Hot Rod.
But god damn, I love me The Touch. And no, not even its inclusion in the porn flick Boogie Nights could tarnish its amazing 80s appeal.
You got the power.
Then comes the solemn DiCola track, The Death of Optimus Prime. It's slow and depressing, and even though as a child I still thought Optimus had a chance to pull through after his rumble with Megatron, this background music immediately made me realize I was mistaken. The OP died, and this music made me feel it more than I wished to. Then comes some more Decola Muzak with the destruction of the Cybertronian moon bases, and then Escape, wherein the Decepticons attack Earth again, and the Autobots make a run for the stars. It's more of the same stuff as Autobot-Decepticon battle, only just a bit more rosy and a bit less dire. Nothing's Gonna Stand in Our Way by Spectre General, aka Kick-Axe, hits the scene when Hot Rod and Kup find themselves crash-landed on the Quintesson planet,
logically called Quintessa,
and have to save themselves from a bunch of robotic piranhas and cybernetic squids. I shit you not. The song itself is rock-heavy and sounds like a teenage anthem of absolute power over one's own life, with lyrics like, "This generation, a fire in our eyes. Strong are the ties to bind us. We don't need no alibi. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Not tonight." Sung over and over again, but it maybe lost a bit of its desired effect when it was used in the scene where Hot Rod fights a mecha cephalopod with a buzzsaw hand and barely wins. But just because that scene does the song a disservice doesn't mean that the track itself is not great. It is. And this brings us to Hunger, again by Spectre General. A little slower than Nothing's Gonna Stand in Our Way, but still metal and still mean. Hunger starts up when Kup and Hot Rod are judged by the Quintessons and then thrown into the Sharkticon water tank to be devoured for their crimes. These crimes are never quite clarified by the five-headed judge presiding over the case, but they were declared innocent anyways and still tossed to their supposed deaths, so whatever. Hunger then blasts through the speakers while the two Autobots drive around, smashing as many of the seemingly limitless Sharkticons that they can, while lines like, pull you into the demolition derby going on. Good clean fun. Weird Al Yankovic's Dare to be Stupid comes on when the remaining Autobots on the planet of Junk get chased around by Wreck-Gar and his fellow Junkions. I am at as much of a loss here over this choice of music as you must be. Don't get me wrong, I am a huge Weird Al fan, but the inclusion of this track in this movie just seemed like a colossal stretch, just so they could say, and featuring songs from Lion, Spectre General, Stan Bush, and Weird Al Yankovic in commercials and on the album cover. Dare to be Stupid then picks up again after Hot Rod shares some Energon goodies with Wreck-Gar and calms him down with the universal greeting.
Ba weep grana, weep ninny bong.
Then the Autobots and Junkions party with the song playing again in the background while robots breakdance and Lady Junkions kiss Grimlock and make him blush. Yeah, you know what?
Don't think about it!
Then finally, there's some more awesome Vince DiCola melodies going on as Unicron attacks all of Cybertron and all the Transformers at once in the epic final battle. And Dare picks up again as the Autobots arrive on the scene and shoot through the devil robot's eye. And then Lion's Transformers theme song plays again and repeats itself like 2 or 3 times during the very long closing credits while Unicron's head begins its orbit around Cybertron after his explosive demise. I know all of these songs by heart, even the Vince DiCola synth tracks, and by God, they still hold up over 35 years later. I once tried an experiment where I had the Wolfman listen to the heavy metal tracks on this album without telling him what they were from. He loved them. Then I showed him that they were from an 80s kids movie about toy robots, and he beat me up and threatened me with a hatchet if I ever told anyone that he said he liked a robot cartoon soundtrack. Oh shit. He doesn't know where I live now, does he? I will end this segment by noting that none of the artists who made the songs and melodies for this movie are popular outside of this toy-selling shill of a project. Well, outside of Weird Al, who has outlived the popularity of almost all of the acts he satirized over his amazingly long career. That may sound sad and depressing for them at first, but when you consider that 99.99979% of all bands ever assembled never get noticed outside of that shitty bar that they play at on Wednesday nights for peanuts and one free drink per musician, the fact that people my age know who Stan Bush, Lion, NRG, and Spectre General, aka Kick-Axe, are, let alone love their songs that they made for this movie, well, that ain't a half bad sad legacy. Like I said before, I still listen to the soundtrack all the time, and it still rocks my world. Guys, I love you. It's ironic how I find it sad that certain actors did voice work for Transformers the movie, but I think it's awesome that I was able to discover a whole new genre of music and new bands via this flick. I am an enigma.
New victims.
Most of the people that I talked to about the 1986 Transformers the movie had slightly different memories of the experience than I did. Some only remembered Optimus Prime dying, some only had random memory flashes of robots getting murdered in horrific pain and suffering. One friend only recalled the kick-ass soundtrack, and another just responded to my questioning with, "That's the movie with the demonic planet that ate shit, right?" So, over the past few decades since its debut, I've made it my mission to show as many people as I could this movie, even if they'd never seen it or the original 80s TV series that it's based on. Most of them, including my wife, thought that it was okay, not amazing or groundbreaking, but not terrible. Most loved the soundtrack, and everyone thought that Unicron had a fantastic character design, though very little raison d'etre. The only reason I'm adding this section to the video is because this surprised the hell out of me. Even though I treat this movie as a revered part of my childhood, I always expect others to mock it in a Mystery Science Theater-like manner. They never do. I'm willing to bet that the Care Bears movie would not get that same respect. Lord knows the G.I. Joe movie doesn't deserve any adoration. So, did I misremember Transformers the movie?
No, I did not misremember it.
1986's Transformers the movie is a confused and cheap cash grab, but my god do I still love it. I don't blame the writers and director for this mess though. They did an admirable job with what they were forced to put in and take out from this movie. The fault for Transformers the movie being so discombobulated, violent, and weird as hell at times is about 90% the fault of Hasbro executives. They originally ordered theatrical releases for My Little Pony, The Transformers, and G.I. Joe for the sole purpose of selling toys and for making a bit of extra box office bank if they could. It was Hasbro who, against the writers' wishes, ordered the crew to violently kill off all the old heroes and villains, and they emphasized that Optimus had to die. They failed to realize that kids of the day were only used to lasers bouncing off the robots in the 65 episodes of the cartoon they watched up until that point, and that Optimus was a lot of latchkey kids' substitute for a caring father figure. Didn't matter, new toys needed buying. Well, the movie bombed at the time, as did the My Little Pony flick, and so Hasbro ordered the Joe movie to go straight to video, and they killed the potential Gem of the Holograms movie before it even went to its script phase in order to save them future embarrassment and financial losses. But I digress. I know that Transformers the movie is not a great movie. Bad editing, some atrocious animation, and the massacre of the Transformers for the sole purpose of selling new toys emphasize this, but it still resonates with me. I only have fond memories of this thing. I believe that the only reason people still talk about Transformers the movie, even now, 35 plus years later, is because of the violence and death and destruction and the unheard of before or since heavy metal soundtrack in a flick aimed at kids. Nobody remembers garbage like the 80s Care Bears movie, the live-action Masters of the Universe movie, or the My Little Pony movie with any affection, but they would if that Care Bear with a 4-leaf clover on its belly got decapitated on screen and somebody yelled,
"Shit, what are we gonna do?"
What really makes me laugh now that I'm an adult is the fact that the head honchos of Hasbro wanted to make sure that Transformers was PG and not G-rated. They thought anything G was for babies and young boys would be put off by that rating. So they ordered characters to be violently killed on screen, and they demanded that there be one piece of profanity in it, no matter how much it stuck out like a sore thumb. They actually thought that without that shit that Spike says, even with Autobots getting blown up, crushed, melted, and shot to hell, this thing would have been G-rated. I mean, wow, the 80s, man. This movie, probably more than any other event in my life, made me grow up. The violence and deaths of all my favorite characters, the shitty toys that were released and made me stop playing with my Transformers action figures, and the introduction to heavy metal all contributed to me losing a bit of my innocence when I exited the theater that August night back in 1986. Not that I ever really fully grew up, mind you, but I never did play with my toys with the same open imagination after I saw this flick. It could be a coincidence, but I also remember borrowing my older brother's Twisted Sister and Rat audio cassettes and records a lot more at that age, and I stopped asking for action figures for Christmas. Since 1986, I've read up on this movie a lot, a whole ton. There are stories galore of how the original draft of the G.I. Joe movie had Duke dying and Hasbro ordering the writers of the Transformers Transformers movie to do the same with Optimus as a great way to pass the leadership torch to another / sell more toys. And we can't forget the multiple drafts for the movie that would have made it a totally different product if used. Some were very similar to what we ended up getting, only with small changes in continuity and characters dying differently, like Ultra Robert Stack being drawn and quartered, and the entirety of the 84 Autobot toy line being viciously mowed down in a last-ditch effort to keep the Decepticons from breaching Autobot City, described as a failed animated Charge of the Light Brigade. And some drafts had entirely different plots, as described earlier. It's been ages since I read that script synopsis though, and I don't recall how much of it is real or imagined by myself at this point in time. Transformers the movie taught me that heroes sometimes die, heavy metal music was actually pretty nifty and not the work of the devil, and that Hot Rod was a total fucking cunt. Seriously, why did they think that we'd ever root for the douchebag who was responsible for Optimus Prime's demise? Anyway, despite its flaws, the 86 Transformers movie is still infinitely better than all the crap featuring giant, interchangeable robots that Michael Bay has shit out over the past few decades. This animated movie may be violent, but it has heart, and it takes some massive chances with its story and head-banging soundtrack that nobody would try in today's cookie-cutter kid movie world. And beyond anything else, Transformers the movie features the most amazing villain of all time. I don't think any bad guy will ever be able to top the awe of first watching Unicron devour a planet and then transform into a giant Satan robot. I am actually amazed that they got away with this stuff even over 30 years ago. To Optimus, till all are one. You know, it's always bugged me, but why can only the Decepticons fly? The jet Decepticons I can understand, but how can the tape recorder and the gun guys hover and fly around, but the Autobots can't? Can't they just install whatever high-tech hovering gear that the Decepticons have on themselves? It's like a huge technical advantage there. They're fucking robots. Just add a few more parts and you can fly too. I just find that weird.
Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?